wanted to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandblanks here, back with a new Shadowverse 2 video. For today's video, I want to talk about a problem that's probably going to hit Cygames like a sack of bricks very soon, aka probably by the next set. And that's the fact that the game is becoming increasingly more and more reliant on golds and legendaries for somebody to actually enjoy the game. Now, as a day one player, I can fully express the fact that I was very lucky to start this game on day one, because if I hadn't started this game on day one, I don't know if I could ever have given myself enough reason to start now. And the reason why I'm saying that is just because the reliance on a full deck of cards that are actually good at meta is super apparent right now. And back in the day, which is kind of crazy saying because it's only been like 3 months since the game released, but back in the day, you could play the game with like maybe one full set of legendaries. Like if you played Sword, you could get away with only Amelias, you could get away with only Alberts, and you wouldn't have the best time, but the game was at least okay because the power level was obviously a good amount lower, and people had way less cards, so the odds that you were playing as other scuff decks is really high as well. And I guess just as a side note before I really get into the video, is that I understand that Cygames needs to make money. I understand that they're incentivized to make people spend and catch back up, but we have to realize at some point that the golds and legendaries in this game, with the exception of like Forest and maybe some portal cards, the legendaries are really important for almost every deck to thrive in certain metas. And I'll talk about their importance and how expensive these decks can get as I go through the crafts. So before I get too distracted and talk about random things, I'll just go ahead and start with Forest golds and legendaries. Now, Forest is obviously notoriously known for being a very cheap deck because you can rely on just golds for Roach. So if I were to just click away all the non-Roach related legendaries, so Grimnir you don't need, Gilneas is pretty optional, you don't need Jerry, you don't need Cynthia. Like, there's a lot of cards you do not need to play Roach right now. And so all the cards you see on screen on the top, with the exception of Gilneas, like these are the only golds that you need for the deck. And this makes the deck very cheap. The issue is that Roach is not a friendly deck. It is not a very casual friendly deck. And just because there is a very cheap deck that exists for beginners, the fact that it's the highest skill floor and the highest skill ceiling in the game means that it's actually not a good thing for free-to-play for them to be like forced into learning the sweatiest thing in the entire game in order to have a cheap time building other decks. And even then, creating golds costs 750 gold, and a lot of these cards like Lily, Roach, Godwood Staff, and Glade, all four of these cards are from the original set for the game from Legends Rise. And if you guys don't know, Legends Rise doesn't have very many relevant legendaries anymore. If you look back here, you can see that Olivia and Ruler Cruciatus is like somewhat useful, but you almost never run him more than as a singular copy. And Olivia has been almost completely phased out for most decks that aren't named Abyss and Dragon. And so I fell into the trap of crafting 2 Olivias at the time because Roach back then liked to play Olivias, and now I'm down this 7,000 dust because I crafted 2 cards that got power crept super fast, and that's something that I'll talk about with the neutral legendaries as we go on. The other Forest legendaries are quite bad, and there is currently a deck that can play these legendaries, to be totally fair, and we'll cover it now. But the other issue is that this deck is also very expensive compared to what Roach is. So this deck obviously being the very recent tempo deck, we can see that this deck you have to run Amataz, Jerry, Titania, and Arya. And you can argue that you don't need to run all of these, but even again, me as a day one player, I only have 2 Amataz, and both of these Amatazes are ones that I crafted. I never actually normally got these Amataz. This was a bad decision I made back in set 2 that's now been like softly saved by you know, this deck being created. Titania, another legendary that I crafted 2 of in set 2 because I just really wanted to play Forest and play tempo, and it was not that great back then. And then Arya, I crafted 1 Arya just to click the full set. So we can see here that I own all these legendaries for this deck, but that's not because I naturally pulled them. That's because I was a Forest fanatic back in set 2. So I created all these cards that you do need for Forest, and even I still don't have enough legendaries for all of these. You need one more Amataz, you need one more Jerry, and so the other deck that's much easier to play, like this is a Forest deck that you can actually recommend to beginners because it's very straightforward and it's very easy to understand because you just learn Mulligan, play the curve, and then look for your outs, like learn the outs. It's very, very good for beginners. Even this deck, if you want to play the technically correct version of this, it requires 11 legendaries because you need 3 Amataz, 3 Jerry, 2 Titanias, and 3 Arias. That is, what was that, like 11 times 3,500? That's more dust than I have now, almost, right? That's like, yeah, that's straight up like, I'd have to use all my dust to create the legendaries required for just this deck, and I still need to craft the Roaches and the Lilies needed for the rest of it. The only real benefit is that I don't need the other golds for this deck because, oh no, you do need Cynthia as well, so you need to go back for Cynthia. And you do need Bale, so you need to go back for Bale to set 1. So if you're trying to build this deck in particular, you need to roll for set 1 because you need all the original golds like Lily, Roach, and Bale. And you also need Arya, but you also need to roll set 2 because you'd want the Titanias and Cynthias. So I guess this deck in particular is ironically very good for day 1 player because there's a lot of day 1 stuff in here. Like, we can see that there are a lot of things that you could have saved from then. But the issue is that the other cards that are really, really important, like Jerry and Titania and Cynthia, like these 3 cards are also immensely important because they are your main win cons later in the game. Jerry's from this set, and so you have to pull in this set to get Jerry. And then Titania and Cynthia are from the set 2, and these cards are basically not played in any other deck. Yeah, and the other big issue is that most of these legendaries are not played in any other deck besides Tempo Forest. And then another issue we can see is that the other Forest deck that we have doesn't even play any of these for the most part. Like, you take out Roach, Lily, Amataz, Jerry, Cynthia, Titania. You can play maybe 1 Titania. You take out Arya, you take out Bale. The other Roach deck that you need will play up to 3 Cruels. You can argue that you don't need all 3. You need to play a few Gilneases just because you need it for the mid-game play. You can play up to 3 Grimnirs. The SVO winner only played 1 Grimnir, but we don't really know if that was a tournament-friendly thing or an actual thing. I mean, you also need 3 Azudias because you need to be able to play Azudia for the OTK factor. And then that's not even counting the golds that you probably would want to play, like maybe like 1 or 2 Lilies. You want Gardens of Lair just to psych your deck faster. You're going to need Glade as well. I mean, Glade's universal in a lot of these decks, so it's kind of fine. But you also want, you're going to want like 2 or 3 Congregants of Unkilling. So if we take out all the cards that could overlap with this deck, we can see that we still have an insane amount of legendaries you need to craft. So if I take out the duplicate copies to crunch down the numbers, we can see we need, to play the full flexibility for his list, you need 3 Grimnirs. You need probably, and you can say 2 Gilneases just to be like a bit cheaper on the budget. You're going to need 3 Cruels, and you're going to need 3 Azudias. That's 3 plus 2. That's another 11 legendaries. And this, again, requires you to focus on different sets of the game if you want to play this deck, because you need the Grimnirs, which is only set 2, and then the rest of these cards are all set 3. So if you if you never played set 1 or set 2 and you only start drawing set 3, then Azudia is probably realistically the only deck you can even cope to create for Forest, because all the decks are going to be chase cards from this current set, but you can't even touch the other Force cards or the Tempo Force deck because there's literally no overlap between these 2 decks in terms of legendaries. And then obviously there's Roach, but again, as a new player, I don't think you're really going to be gunning to play Roach immediately. Sword is going to be another thing where Sword is a bit, I think it's just slightly better on the free-to-play friendliness, because when you look at Sword, you can see that a lot of the cards that end up showing up are cards that are pretty universal for all Sword decks, but some of them aren't really that universal. So what are the cards that you're going to want from Sword right now? Right now, Loot Sword is definitely the best deck you can play. I don't know why I put Premium here, but if we take out all of the packages for like mid-range Sword, and you want to talk about like aggro Sword, then we can see very quickly that the deck list is a bit cheaper. Like, you can run 1 Kagemitsu, you can run, like, it's probably always going to be 3 Vowels, but you don't need Jerry. But for the most part, you are going to want a lot of these other cards that exist. And so even Sword, if we look at only legendaries, Sword is going to want, we can take out Kagemitsu just for the sake of budget argument, and then Amelia as well. But you want 3 copies of all of these. That is just straight up 12 legendaries for Sword immediately off the bat, for one of the fastest and like probably most popular decks right now. And we see once again that there's a nice little spread across the the sets where we need Albert, because Albert's like one of the most important finishers for the late game for Sword. So you need to go set 1. Then you need Odin, because Odin is one of the best banish and storm units between your Sincero cast and your Albert cast. And then you have Sincero and Octress, which are basically required because these are your best early to mid game cards, because Sincero, like the Octress and Sincero pipeline is like the main way you cheese out wins on like turn 6 and 7, because you cast Octress, you fuse constantly into Sincero, and then you just kill them on turn 7 with Sincero, Evo, and the Octress spell. So you need these to be you need these counts to be as high as possible, because if you don't have these cards in your deck and game plan, you'll notice the really bad effects or like the really low efficiency of your deck really quickly. And then we go to the golds for this. You need 3 Returning Slash. You probably are going to play 3 Vals because he's so strong. You're probably going to play 3 Zirconia because you're an aggro deck. You're probably going to play 3 Congreve Usurpations, maybe 2. I don't really know what the determining factor is, but you're going to play him because he's a really strong loot generator with really strong board presence, and you're going to play at least 1 Ravening Tentacles, which is a little better, but these are still like another 12 golds and 1 gold, again, from across, or at least this one's not across a few different sets. You're only playing set 1 and set 3. But that changes when you go backwards and you start looking at the mid-range list for Sword. So mid-range Sword, you still play a lot of these same cards, but when you play mid-range Sword, you're going to end up trying to go for Gildaria and Amelia. And the big problem is that you're probably still playing all of these legendaries along with Gildaria and Amelia. So maybe you cut down to 1 Odin, but you can even go up to like a few Uriuses. And obviously, you aren't playing 18 legendaries in this Sword deck. Like, you're going to be playing a lot of these as a 2 of, 1 of, because you need the other gold cards to like have an actual game plan. But again, the cost for Sword is so prohibitively high that someone who like wants to be a real Sword enjoyer as a new player coming in this set will find it almost impossible to really catch up to the raw dust requirement. They'll be spending like at least the next 2 sets just catching up on all of these legendaries that they want, and that's not even including the new legendaries that are going to release with the next set. And every other deck is going to be more of the same. Like, I'll probably just make these next few sections a lot shorter, but it's just like a huge, like, I guess, okay, before I get too ahead of myself and start stuttering like crazy, Rune is ironically like the best benefactor of the way that Cygames has handled balance and new sets, because Rune has had the privilege of having almost all of their original legendaries and Legends Rise be just totally relevant. So if you played Rune at the very start of the set, you will have 3 Angrea, 3 Kuon, and 3 Dimension Climb, and this will never change. And back then, this made Rune really expensive because this was 9 legendaries, and most decks back then were like, oh, we're a bit budget, so we're playing only 3. Oh, we're a bit budget, so we're only playing 6. The most expensive legendary deck back then was probably Abyss, I think, and Abyss was like going from like 12 to 15, depending on how expensive you want it to be. But Rune was like right there on the more expensive side of the deck cost. But then as the game has gone on and more stuff has released, Rune has benefited because the only real legendaries that they had to add to this deck were Norman, which is obviously in set 2, and then you didn't really have to play Odin, but you could play Odin. Like, Odin wasn't required, but if you wanted to, you could place Odin in a mid-range Rune or something. And then going into this next set, Rune got absolute trash with, not really trash because they are still playable, but they got really quote-unquote bad cards, that really bad legendaries rather, that support an entirely different archetype. So if you're a Rune player starting in set 1, you initially suffered because your deck was really expensive for the full benefit, but it's really ironic because Rune is still like very top tier, playing the very same core they have. But what if, and okay, I'll say what if just in case like somehow Cygames really rips away current spell boost Rune power. Like, I don't know how they're gonna make these core Rune cards like not playable anymore, but let's just pretend there's a world where somehow like these 10 legendaries, like you only play 1 Cocytus and you don't have to play Cocytus anymore, but let's pretend there's a world where these 9 legendaries somehow get power crept and dropped from the Rune playlist. That means everyone who really enjoys Rune, like let's say that you're really in love with Daria's like aesthetic, or you really enjoy I don't even know his name, Keith, like the new Battle Pass guy. Like, let's say that you really enjoy their leader's aesthetics. Or like Kaori, obviously, the default girl, like what if you enjoy her aesthetics? If they make Spell Boost or a Truth Rune really OP in this upcoming set, then what's going to happen is that now you have to, it's like the exact same thing as Forest, where you're going to have to be scrambling to get all of these legendaries that you might have not cared about because they were useless in this current set. and you have to scramble to make 3 of these, 3 Voltaharias, 3 Ryos, and then you have to also create the next 6 legendaries that are being released next set, not even including the potential neutral legendaries, which also adds to your cost. So you have a potential of 12 new legendaries and include for next set, and then another 6 here, 18 new legendaries to create if Cygames decides that Spell Boost Rune goes into gutter, and now Truth Rune is the new top dog. So yeah, Rune is obviously a bit better, but you can see just like how in the beginning it was still really expensive, but then as we gone on, it just keeps going on and on. And then so like we're just gonna continue just reviewing like the really expensive or the raw legendary count that some of these decks will need. Like for example, Dragon. If you want to play like really peak Dragon, odds are like if you wanted to explore everything that Dragon has to offer, you need all of these cards. Like we need to go through the legendaries first. I think the golds, like we've already talked about the golds enough that it makes sense. Like all these cards, besides me, with the exception of Burn Knight, you will want all these cards to be in your roster to have a really good time with Dragon. And this is what, 9? This is 9 total legendaries. That's a lot of legendaries to have 3 of, so you can explore and pivot into every single dragon combination possible if you're really a dragon enjoyer. And these are, again, split across all 3 sets. Like, obviously, Azure Ifrit is not really that important because you can run stuff like Proto-Drag or Genesis Dragon instead. Like, that's, like, totally fine for Reach. But if you want to enjoy the Disdain package, you have to build Azure Ifrit and you have to build Galmu. Even if the Disdain package is kind of objectively bad, as we found out this set, if Disdain package gets even better next set, you still have to go back and grab these, which is again another 6 legendaries that you might not have gotten because you were too busy pulling on set 1 and set 2 because maybe you wanted to play a different deck that was relevant then. Like let's say that you're a new player starting now and you're trying to play the best deck in the game, which is Rune. You will never see Galmu, you will never see Azure Ifrit, you will never see Fenny, you'll never see Odin or Phylene. Like you might see Forte and you might see Garyu, but if you're playing Forte Garyu, then that means you're still going to want a few versions of Galmu for the mid-game Storm and a few copies of Odin just for, again, a few copies of mid-range Storm. And so no matter which way you're like cutting it, Dragon is like prohibitively expensive for anyone starting now that wants to be free to play. Like you almost have to whale. Like even as a day 1 player, you probably have nothing but Dragon legendaries if you just were a Dragon fan because of how expensive Dragon was. And the I guess like kind of the worst offender of being super expensive, we can see that just from the very start with from the very start with Abyss, you wanted 3 Argavi, 3 Olivia, 3 Medusa, 3 Cerberus. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's 12 legendaries just off the rip. And so you want 12 legendaries off the rip with just initial Abyss. And back then, people thought Abyss was really bad because, as it turns out, not everyone had 12 legendaries to put into their deck starting out unless they're a whale. And whales are probably more willing to play stuff like Rune and Portal, which were confirmed tier 1 back then because they were just confirmed tier 1. And so Abyss was like one of those decks that just wasn't ever able to shine purely because of the fact that no one wanted to craft 12 legendaries to see the full power of Abyss back then. And then as you go forward into the future decks or in the future sets, every single card that you see is something that Abyss wanted. So Abyss wanted at least 1 or 2 copies of Grimnir because it was a good mid-range tech. You wanted 3 copies of Charon because Charon was really good with their 2 costs because you could play Charon into Eve of the 2 cost and get really good value. Odin was kind of like tech card, but Odin was so ubiquitous in last set that you were almost never wrong for playing it just to randomly counter your Ward Havens on ladder. And then Gensetsu and Yuzuki was one of the best anti-roach tools in the late game, so you just had to have at least 2 copies of Gensetsu Yuzuki or else you were just kind of chopped. And even if you wanted to play Aggro Abyss, even Aggro Abyss still needed to build Argavi and Odin, which were still 6 legendaries, which is a lot cheaper than expected, to be fair, but it's still like a bit expensive when you think about the fact that aggro is usually synonymous with cheap in most games. And if we go back to something like Sword, currently the only real aggro list in the game is Sword and Tempo Forest. And if you remember, you want to go back to those parts of the videos, or if you want to go back to that part of the video and check out the dust cost of those are some of the most expensive decks in the game. So even aggro, in Cygames' view, deserves to be super expensive for really no reason at all. And then going further into even Modibus, which is the new really strong set, or the new really strong cards for this new set, you still need 3 copies of Nachos because you need to be able to proc the mode quest easily, and you need 3 copies of RMV because RMV is super, super powerful. And so even with Modibus, you're still looking back and playing a lot of these old legendaries. Like you're still gonna be playing you're still playing Cerberus, and you're still playing Insensei Yuzuki. So even if you ignore all the other legendaries, like let's say that you're not a believer of Medusa and Modibus, that is still 12 legendaries you need, and 6 of those 12 legendaries are still the newest legendaries. So if you weren't lucky as a free-to-play, you still have to craft these legendaries to get the most out of Modibus, not even considering the fact that Modibus plays a good amount of golds as well. Like you need 3 Congregants of Entwining, you need 3 Streaming Loathings, and you can play up to 2 or 3 Rage of Serpents. So what that ends up creating is this very expensive deck where you need a lot of like old cards and new cards, or you need a lot of the new cards rather, to make it shine, which again is really cost prohibitive for people that have just started the game because they need to build their old core and then also actually pull the legendaries and make it into the current meta. Haven is kind of an example of how fast the set can switch up on you. Haven in set 1 wasn't really that good, so we don't really need to talk about their legendaries. But now in set 2 and 3, like if you wanted to play Wardhaven, you had to build every single you almost played like everything from the set back then. So you would play 3 Grimnirs because you needed them. You would play 3 Wilberts because Wilbert was super strong back then, and you would play 3 Aethers because she was one of your best win cons, and depending on how aggressive you were as the Wardhaven player, you might even sprinkle in 1 or 2 Odins as well. That's not even including the fact that you still have to go backwards once again for a card like Salefa, because Salefa was really, really important for your mid-game, or rather for your early game stabilization, and you also needed John because John was so ridiculously strong. So if we look at that, just for that back then, we had John as 3 of, Aether as a 3 of, Wilbert as a 3 of, Salefa as a 3 of, and Grimnir, who I've been put in because I just forgot to click on him when I was making this list earlier. So just off of that alone, that is, if we take out these 2, that is a lot of legendaries, 15 legendaries at least to play Wardhaven. And then going into this upcoming set, like thankfully as a Crest Haven player, you do maintain a lot of these cards as value. Like you still play Grimnir, you still play Salefa, you still play Wilbert, still play John, like thank God. And I guess like ironically, good or like whether it's good or bad, the only real new legendary you need to play is Marwyn. Himeka is like pretty optional, like just 1 or 2 copies, but the fact of the matter still is that you're probably playing at least 2 Gilneys. So it's what, this is 17 legendaries, maybe 18, or maybe maybe 18 legendaries if you want to play 1 or 2 copies of Himeka. Like this is still one of the most expensive decks, and this is really like the best Haven has ever done. So if you were a fan of Haven, you're a fan of Control, you're playing almost 18 legendaries? That is insane. That's almost half your deck of legendaries. Like, I will never come close to building Crest Haven at this point if I did get lucky with my Wilberts in set 2. And then Portal, our sweet summer child, went from being like objectively top 3 decks from the original set to just being not even worth talking about in these current sets. And this is even more, I guess, like more revealing of how Cygames has a tendency to shift what a deck is good at. In the original Portal deck, you technically only needed, you only really played these 3 cards for legendaries. Like 9 legendaries, once again, just like Rune, very expensive technically back then, but not that expensive now because of how many legendaries we've come to expect per deck. But then the moment you got to set 2, Portal kind of just fell to like the face of the planet because, as you might guess, there was nothing really. I mean, you played Karula, so you got 1 good legendary. Why is it not showing up? I might be going insane. Yeah, I clicked the wrong set. You got Karula, so you had to add another 3 legendaries to your original legendary set. Maybe you cut Yudi, so it's still 9. But if you cut Yudi, that means you have to play the Puppet package. And if you play the Puppet package, you're probably playing something like Zwei as well, and Grimnir and Odin. So even as a Puppet package, which was not considered to be that good, like to be totally honest with you, you still had a pretty high cost to contend with. So Puppets, again, you played Yudi, Zwei, Orcus, probably a Grimnir, just because Grimnir was very Why is he not showing up? Am I going, what did I not click on? Grimnir is very good because Grimnir is Grimnir. Like, you Evo and you get to clear the board, which means that your Orcus doesn't have to swing certain minions into clearing the board. And then you have Odin. So even as a puppet player, which was not even a good deck, you were still playing probably around like 11 legendaries at least. And then now, obviously, with the current set, this is all those puppet legendaries you built, all those, like maybe Grimnir is still useful, but you're now completely pivoting into a new set of legendaries with Gilnilys, Axia, and Lashena. You still are playing the 3 Odins, but again, if you didn't get the Odins like I did craft my singular Odin, still super expensive, and it just keeps going on and on. And so we don't know what exactly Cygames will do this upcoming set, which is still like a very long while out. Like it's probably like 6-7 weeks out. But 6-7 weeks out, if you were to look at your daily income between normal missions and assuming that you get like all silvers from your like daily pool, your daily pool is 8 cards. If you're lucky, you'll get gold. So let's just pull a number out of our butts and say that you get 250 dust from disenchanting all of your silvers. Let's just say you never get a legendary you want from your daily pools, which is probably kind of likely. You're probably bound to get like 240 dust overall from your missions. I got kind of unlucky today, so I only have the lowest value of missions. So we're probably getting like 500 dust a day. 500 dust a day is just about 1 legendary every 6 to 7 days. So in 6 weeks, you can craft 6 legendaries, which is enough for literally no complete decks besides maybe like Rune if you got lucky. So even if you played every day, like obviously you get more gold, so you might get lucky with the packs. You might get a few legendaries here and there. If you were to start today as a free-to-play, you have only the set 3, I can't even open them. You have only the set 3 starter decks, which is only 3 decks. So you're locked to Abyss, Dragon, and Sword. So if you like the other decks, get bent. And you also have the initial new player bingo set, which is only good if you're picking stuff like Sword and yeah, I think it's just Sword actually. I had to check. It's been a while since I checked the bingo stuff. So Cygames is basically forcing you into only Sword, but if you want to play Sword, you have to get the loot package. And if you want to play a loot package, you have to craft 3x of Odin, 3x of 3x Odin, 3x Ostrich, and 3x Sincero. So even if you want to play Sword, which is what Cygames is really funneling you into, if you start right now today, you can't even play the mid-range variant, which is sometimes better depending on the ladder you're in, and you're still down like tens of like probably like 40,000 dust just starting out the game because I don't know, we just have to make money. And that's another thing, like I don't know how you're gonna attract new players like that are willing to spend money, because when they look at these decks, they'll go to the card packs, and I've never done the math to be fair, so let's see. I don't actually know how expensive it is to buy packs just straight up. I'm assuming each pack is 100 of this dust, and so if we go into here, each pack is like maybe $2. So to really, if you check my rolls, let's just say that you're gonna do 100 packs, like just to catch up, quote unquote. That's 400. That's $200 per 100 pulls. That's $400 just to catch up now. That's kind of insane. And so yeah, I really hope Cygames makes the treasure, like the chest event, permanent. Like it just went away today, but I think the chest event is really good for free to play, just to give them reasons to play the game, and also gives them some sort of catch up because it's occasionally a legendary card, occasionally a pack. Like it's really good bonuses for you to actually like catch back up or like just maintain a lead for the next set. Like I'm not saying, to be totally fair, I'm not saying that free to play should have every deck they want. Like free to play should have maybe like 2 decks, 3 decks at most in any current ongoing set if they're playing actively and being smart with their purchases. I can totally vibe with that. The issue is that if you start the game right now, free to play has access to literally 0 decks for like at least a month. And unless you get super lucky, you will not have fun playing ladder because of how heavy net decking is in the ladder and how well developed almost every other player's deck is in the game. And this probably should go on the beginning of the video, but I'm putting it in the back. Maybe I'll just cut this in front. I probably won't. But yeah, it's just really insane just how prohibitive the game is right now. And I really hope Cygames sees that and kind of makes their business philosophy a bit more generous so that we can actually have new players filtering in that are willing to spend and also just willing to play the game as free to plays. So we'll see where they go with that. That'll be the video. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.